call the meeting to order. Wednesday, May 6th, 5 p.m. Ordinance Review Committee. We'll stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we have the meeting minutes, committee review notes, and the meeting notes reviewed by the attorney to kind of look at or approve or discuss.
So the format that I think I can adopt and try to keep everything organized into one platform is what I did this last week was, I think the best thing, and I kind of did this for the water ordinance when we did it, was instead of doing minutes for every meeting, I always do like follow-up notes anyways to send to Meredith. So I'm just going to attach those now instead of doing minutes because it summarizes what we've done and it's no sense copying, pasting, and putting them in minutes. Mm-hmm. And we officially don't need to take minutes. We don't, we're an advisory committee, an ad hoc committee, so it's not by state law that we have to or state statute. And then we have so many documents we've been working on that I then decided to just do a section called working documents. So these are all of the documents that we have, thus far looked at. Once we get these finalized, I think what I'll do is then put another category that says, final draft documents. And so then we won't have such a running long list. Mm-hmm. So that's the new format that I would like to kind of see if that works. So if everyone is
We'll probably
okay.
get more information out of just the notes as we go along,
Right.
rather than trying to summarize it. If you just say we discussed it, it means nothing.
That, right. And that's what I figured, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm all
I'm
in
good with
favor
it.
of that, absolutely.
Hey, Betty, can you swing your microphone? There you go.
Yep, yeah, I'm all in favor of that. So I guess with that being said, if no one objects to that, that's what we'll do. And then maybe we start our review of Chapter 2 with Meredith.
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Meredith.
Is everyone staying dry today?
Yeah, sort of.
All right. So I printed out my own copy, but I'm also pulling up the Word document. I know there are a lot of track changes on here. So in some places, the comments may have gotten cut off. So I'll be going kind of back and forth, but stop me if there's any questions or confusion about anything. And again, there's a lot of edits in here, but most of them are just for readability and just making sure things are clear, rephrasing things slightly. So I'm not going to go over every single word that I wrote, but I'm going to try and pick out some of the issues that I talk about in the comments on the side. Mm-hmm. All right, so starting at the beginning, so section 1, to which activities does the ordinance apply? So here, only change I made really was just changing that to a list format. I think that just is more consistent with the format that we've been adopting for this entire chapter. I didn't make too many substantive edits there. And like I said, I'm just going to keep moving through everything since there's a lot of pages in this chapter, so stop me at any point if you have questions. All right, so 1.2 for who's responsible for administering the ordinance. Here, I really just added a more express showing of where the authority comes from for the code enforcement officer, planning board, and board of appeals. Just citing the town charter, the ordinance, and state law. So just making that a little clearer. Under code enforcement officer, and I think this is something that we'll see a lot in this chapter, which I think Betty had made a comment on already, that there may be some repetitive sections, since of course at the beginning we're going through the role of each entity, and then at the end we're going through the process for applying for a permit under each entity or approval. So there's a few sections that I've marked, and I think after we go through it once, it'll be a bit easier to figure out what we want to take out so that things aren't, repeated, I think 3 to 4 times in some places here. So for under the code enforcement officer, again, really just made some clear, added some clear language here, didn't make too many substantive changes. Under 1C, I just added more of the powers, enumerated those that are listed in the statute, just to make sure that that's extra clear. And then I think my first comment is for number 2, administrative and record keeping duties. So here, the only change I made is that CEOs generally, we don't consider them to be the responsible entity for keeping all statutes, all laws for the state and for the town. So I just removed that requirement just to make sure that there isn't any ambiguity there, that the CEO should be maintaining those files, which if Lindsay's there, she can also let me know, what the kind of standard process is for the town for any of these issues. And then moving on to B, for maintaining permanent records of all land use enforcement and permitting activities. Here, I did recommend that it might be good to include denied or revoked permits so that we make sure that there's a record of those as well, not just the issued permits. I wasn't sure if those records are generally maintained already, if that's kind of a current practice going on, or whether we wanted to include that here.
I think it's good to include, so what we do now, and Lindsay may be coming in late, I'm not sure, but I can answer. So what we have been doing, or what we do now, and what has been done in the past, is each map and lot, files are kept by map and lot. And then if it's planning board, I'm going to say with history, I'm not sure if it makes it into the map and lot file in the code enforcement officer's office. But then, planning board maintains their own files at the same time. And again, it's usually, we're trying on planning board, and we're trying to develop the map and lot filing system. It's kind of been random in the past.
Okay. So then I think it seems fine to add in, making it very clear that denied or revoked permits should be maintained along with issued permits. When we get to the planning board, we can maybe talk about including some more record keeping requirements there, as it seems like you guys are already pretty much doing, or at least starting to establish the map and lot record keeping for the planning board as well. Okay, so we'll include that there. And then I just added in C here, just maintaining and managing the records under the Maine Freedom of Access Act. So just making sure any FOIA requests are basically captured under that record keeping responsibility. And then for permit administration, here,
Meredith?
I really just cleaned up this section, added date and time stamp applications upon receipt, cleaned up some of the requirements here. This could also, like I said, be moved down, I think, later on once these sections are kind of finalized, to make sure that they aren't too repetitive. But for now, I think it's fine to leave as is.
Meredith, can I just skip
go
back?
ahead.
I'm sorry. Can I just skip back to the maintaining of the records?
Sure. Yep.
I know it's, I guess you could say common sense that it's just like land use records, but can we clarify so, you know, sometime down the road, somebody doesn't say, well, how come you're not maintaining, you know, all for you?
Oh, sure. You mean the CEO isn't
Right.
maintaining all
Right.
for it? Yeah, sure. I can make that a little bit more specific. My goal with that really was just to try and show that all those records are still, you know, they're available if someone were to make a freedom of access request. But I can clean that line up.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Okay. And then jumping back down to permit administration. So once we get to subsection B for acting on complete permit applications, one question is in the current ordinance, you're using business days, 30 business days for the application's completion. I would recommend just calendar days. Usually that makes it easier for deadlines, just clarity for anyone using or looking at the ordinance to try and calculate that, and also ease on your end too. But let me know if there's any pushback to that.
I'm fine with that. I think it's easier, like you said, it's.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Change it to calendar days?
Change it to
Okay.
calendar.
Calendar.
Yep.
Great. I will make that change. And I'm assuming that'll be kind of the same thing for all, let's see, for all of the boards that use that same calendar deadline.
Yes.
And then, perfect. Then for number 4, for issuing permits. So here I made one change, or right above issue permits, for failure to act within the time frame specified in subsection B shall not be deemed approval of the application. So before, this was basically just saying denial by default if there was a failure to act, and that it is a little bit risky to put that type of language in there, just because it can create some confusion. Generally, a denial requires, you know, written reasons to support that decision. So I just cleaned up that language a little bit and made that more clear that it just isn't deemed an approval. It's not an explicit denial. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think that's all the comments there. Moving on to the next page. And again, stop me if there's any of these sections that you'd like to go into more detail on. Going all the way down to inspection and compliance authority here, as we've talked about before, I just added some language from the statute, just making that a little bit more clear for the code enforcement officer's authority to enter onto property. Really just restating what the law says there to make that a bit clearer.
And what number is that? I'm sorry.
I think
5C.
Yep, 5C.
Oh, okay, I jumped ahead too far. When you
did-
said next
I did
page,
too.
I was like, okay.
Okay. And then moving on to number 6. So just in a few places, not a big deal, but the ordinance tends to just say to the municipal officers. I'm not sure if we wanted to be a little bit more specific whenever we mention that and say the select board or a specific entity that we want to be referencing there. I'm talking about 6C. Here's the first time I think that it comes up.
Yes, it should be select board.
Perfect. I will make that change throughout. And then moving to number 7. So this is a section that I was looking at for a little bit about revocation and suspension of permits. So I think it's a little bit unclear kind of the difference for when a permit is being suspended versus when it's being revoked. I wasn't sure if we're trying to say it can only be revoked after the CEO has suspended the application. And let's say, I think how I wrote it here is if the corrective measures hadn't been completed in order for the suspension to be lifted, then that's when the revocation would happen. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on how that process works now or how you'd like it to work moving forward. But I think this section needs a little bit more clarity on that process, and also when it's escalated to the municipal officers to potentially, legal escalation, to try and bring that maybe as a court proceeding. Are there any thoughts on that section?
I'm just trying to refer back. This is actually a section that was recently added. So I'm just trying to look and see how we have it written at this time, or in our current ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
If I can even find it.
I think it's 116, but I don't know. Procedures, inspections,
Okay.
violations, and penalties. I don't know if it specifically says suspension there, but I think that's a good place to start.
So I think it's currently leaving it at the discretion of the code enforcement officer on which, because it currently reads, a permit or approval may be suspended or revoked, so it doesn't break it out. So to me, the way it's written now, it kind of leaves it at the discretion of the CEO. I mean, it would, for me, make sense that once it's revoked, or once it's suspended, if you haven't done what needs to be done to bring it into compliance, whatever action the CEO wants, then she can revoke it, or they revoke, would be my...
What do you think for a timeline on it? I mean, because how bad is it before?
So I think the timeline would be at the discretion of the CEO, because depending on why she's suspending the application, is it something small that someone can take care of in 7 days, or is it something that, is larger and she's going to give them, 14 or...
Yeah, the next section talks about the suspension remains in force until, something happens. One of these three things happens.
Right.
But you're right, there's no timeline.
I certainly don't mind giving, or at least granting the CEO the discretion
Right.
for timeline.
Yeah, because it'll be case specific.
Right, and she's going to have the most information.
Yeah, the most current and firsthand.
Yeah, and that's how I was thinking when I first drafted it. The way it's written right now is leaving it up to the CEO's discretion for the time frame. I think it makes sense. Everything's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and some things could take 2 months. Some things could take a week. I think it makes sense to leave that piece under the discretion of the CEO, and then Betty, from what you were saying, so split it out so that suspension has to occur first. And then if that time frame is not met, then the permit will be revoked.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
And once revoked, do we want to say that means it's automatically referred to the select board for further enforcement action? Is that up to the discretion of the CEO? How are we leaving that in terms of the legal escalation section?
Leave it at the CEO.
So, I mean, I think once it's revoked, then, well, so I guess I should be asking you, what do you mean by the legal? To me, like, once it's revoked, then the permit is no longer good. They would have to reapply for a permit.
I guess I'm
The way,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm confused what you're saying as far as going back to the selectmen with it. I mean, it's in the hand of the CEOs, right? I mean,
I think the vein you're going on is that if something that was approved was not done, and something was done that was not approved and is illegal, then where does it go?
Oh.
Who does it go to?
Yes,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
So not so much
The
so,
escalation.
yeah, so if,
Yeah.
I guess if
yeah, it makes a
the,
lot more sense.
yeah, if there is a violation that still exists, then I think that it would fall on, you know, the CEO then having to move into a notice of violation by, you know, by law.
Which would notify the select board.
Which would then notify the select board. And then, you know, it is the select board's, the select board is the only one that can authorize the CEO to move forward with any legal
Action.
action.
Yeah, that works.
I think that's what you needed, right, Meredith? That
Yeah,
chain of
definitely. No,
command there.
that's the question that I was wondering about, if there are still property violations existing on the property. But we can, I mean, I was trying to just understand what this section meant since it was in the current chapter as we had it written, just with that referral piece of things. But I think we can adjust it more in line with the normal kind of protocol of after a notice of violation is issued and kind of the statutory steps for what happens after that, rather than it being kind of a CEO discretionary decision to refer to the select board.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing some part of the process there. Okay, so if there's no other comments on that part, then I'll come back to everybody with a cleaner version of this, based on what we just talked about. And then moving forward, shoreland district violations. So here again, just added in some language for additional clarity under A, subsection A, and then I. The written notice shall require that the violation be removed, abated, or otherwise corrected within 10 days from the receipt of the notice. I added that in. I'm assuming that's kind of what was intended there, but just want to make sure.
Well, it's kind of hard to ask someone to take care of it if they got it, even though it may have been dated one day and they get it 9 days later.
Yeah.
So receipt makes sense to me.
So receipt does. I'm just trying to think of the few that we've dealt with Jamie, and I think he's kind of, again, left that number of days as, a case by case. Because I think he has suggested more of a 14, but.
Okay. Yeah, I can look into that if we would prefer maybe 14, if that's kind of been the practice
Yeah, and
recently. I can ask Jamie about that too.
Yeah, I'll take a look at, or you have on file anyways, you copied on the couple of violations that we have out now.
Yep. Okay, I will take a look at those. And then moving to the next page. So here for, again, kind of the same question about revocation, permit denial, suspension. Here, I think we can kind of make that mirror the previous section, again, making it suspension has to occur first. And then revocation after that. And then there was some language in here under permit denial, suspension, or revocation, under subsection 1, saying deny the issuance of any future permit to or suspend or revoke an existing permit held by. Was there an intention for how someone was to decide between denying issuance of future permits or suspending or revoking existing permit? Is that, again, just up to the CEO's discretion to decide which course of action to take on a case-by-case basis?
So I think the intent of the current ordinance was, and again, I think this has recently been added, was that if there is any notice of violation or any violation at all on the property, that there is no leeway, there just will not be any issuance of any permits or.
Okay, so pretty much just no issuance of future permits regardless, not leaving it up to the CEO to do either.
Right. Until, and I think it says in here, until the violation has been corrected.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Should it be paid in full? Court-awarded costs are paid in full,
Yes.
obviously.
Yep.
I assume.
Yeah.
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 Okay. And then under the civil enforcement action, so under 1B, costs incurred to remove, abate, or correct the violation, I'm assuming that means we're trying to say the municipality can step in to fix a violation if it hasn't been fixed by the property owner. Is that what was intended? And then, assess costs to the property owner for any, cost to fix the issue?
And what, I'm sorry, that is B, what section?
So under civil enforcement action, the small double I, under permit denial,
next page.
suspension, or revocation, that next section, civil enforcement action, and then 1B, costs incurred to remove, abate, or correct the violation.
So I think this was just more or less outlining what the actual notice of violation says, what the state law says. So I don't think that so much, we know by state law that we have to go back to the court if we do remove it to get those costs correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think it's just kind of listing here, so if somebody's reading it, they're gonna say, oh, they're gonna come back and get me for the cost.
But I think what Meredith is asking is if the town goes in and hires someone to fix this, that then the violator has to pay for that fix.
Well, and again, that's gonna be up to the courts to decide. We can't just bill the homeowner. We have to go back to the court, say, this is the cost that we have. Will you grant us to recoup these? And I've never seen it happen, but they may come back with a different amount.
But it doesn't say that in this section at all, just unpaid penalties. If you don't look at B, then it says court costs and attorney's fees.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about paying for restitution or whatever needs to happen there. that they,
Yeah,
that they may
I
be
think
charged
the
for.
intention, now Betty, that makes a little bit more sense, just listing out the possible civil remedies here.
Right.
So I can just make that a bit more clear that that was the intention. It's not trying to grant the town separate powers to try and remedy the situation other than through the court process.
Right.
At least for this subsection, if that's how I'm hearing things.
Yeah, so it's basically taking that last paragraph of the NOV and just, like you said, these are the civil actions.
Perfect. So I can just make that a little bit more clear that we're really just listing, all the possible statutory remedies for a civil action. All right. Continuing on, again, didn't make too many changes here. Occupant, I just made that clear as the word that we're defining for this subsection. I know we're keeping a definitions list as well, if we want to make sure that that's on there.
Defining occupant.
Yep. And I'm keeping my own list of things to add to the definitions as well, so we
Right.
can always consolidate that at some point. And then under number 10 for discretionary authorities, here just added in pretty much wherever there's discretion for any of the entities, the CEO, Planning Board, Board of Appeals, just adding in language about reasonable discretion and consistent with the ordinance's purpose and standards, just to make sure that discretion always appears to be limited by some reasonable constraints.
Yes.
Yep.
No queens.
And then moving to the next section. All right. So here for the extension question at the bottom, so under A, where we just talked about the CEO's discretion, under that, we talk about granting permit extensions for a period not to exceed 1 year. Later on, we have more requirements that we list out, including that the applicant has to then issue a written request for the extension. I'm not sure if we want to include that in both places. Again, this might be a question just for going through later and kind of combing out where the repetitive parts are.
If you put it in, then at least people don't have to thumb through to find out what it should be. And I think
Sure.
that's one of the things
I
we're
think
trying
that's
to
kind of the
accomplish here.
balance. Yeah, is the question of how much do we want people
Right.
to flip back and forth, and how much do we want, everything to not be too repetitive. So I'll leave that up to you guys, but we can include that part here. All right. And then under certificates of approved use, so here I think we're changing all of that to the zoning compliance certificate. I think I recall that from the last meeting,
Yes.
and we're all still good to move forward with that. I think I've changed it in most places on here. All right. The next few sections as we get into the planning board, here again, just adding some things for clarity. No major substantive edits here. Feel free to kind of look through this section if you have any questions. Once we get to subsection 4 under the planning board for application review responsibilities. So here I added in, I believe, what we have in the current ordinance, which is 35 days of determining a complete application has been submitted, or when public hearings will be held. Did we want to revisit that, change that? Good with that? Just want to make sure I was adding in the right information.
So are you saying, do we want to keep the 35 days, or do we?
Yeah, just want to make sure that that's what's intended again, since that's what's in, I believe, the current ordinance.
Is that not in state statute? That's why I thought it was always there.
I can check on that for the planning board. I know I was just looking at the statute for the Board of Appeals. I'll confirm, yeah, and see if that is a statutory requirement. All right, and then I added a comment here under the application review responsibilities. We may want to in some of these sections. I'm not sure if we still want to include kind of the same appendices that are in the current ordinance, kind of going over the list for all the requirements for each type of application. If we want to keep that, if we want to cite to that here, or if we want to kind of include everything in one place, again, for clarity for anyone reading it.
So, and you can weigh in here, Casey, because you're on the planning board. But for me, I would almost rather see all of that incorporated in the ordinance, and then it's not at the discretion of the planning board. You know, boards come and boards go. What you're actually seeing in the appendices now is the board prior to this one had developed. So we actually had a note in the planning board meetings to have you review those, because some of they seem lengthy. So
Yeah.
I think in our minds we were going to say we want to review those, but then for me, I would incorporate them within this section or within a section. And then they're definite, this is what the planning board, review for findings of facts and completion.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense with what we're kind of trying to do, especially with this chapter, with the reformatting and making it, super easy to anyone reading it, that it's all in one place. So I think that makes sense.
Can I just ask a clarifying question there? So the planning board may require additional information, including but not limited to, and then there are 3 things on that first list. So the way I read that, it's the first one, the second one, or the third one. Could it be and? Could it be more than one of those in that list? Planning board guy?
So,
I would assume yes.
So maybe,
so I'm not getting what you're, so when I read that,
But not-
you're talking for B, I guess what would be
So-
now letter I.
right,
Require additional technical information.
Yeah.
Including but not
Oh, that
limited
one.
to.
yes. Soil reports, contour and drainage plans, or environmental data. To me, that reads, you can ask for one of those, but not 2 or 3.
Oh, the
Oh,
or.
because of the
The
or.
or, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think, by including the line, including but not limited to, we're trying to say that it could be any of these things individually, it could be all of them, or it could be something else that's not included here. If we think that sounds confusing the way it's written with the or, we can change it. I don't think that's
I would either get rid of the or say and or. And
yeah,
slash
we can
or.
also say and or, yep.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah.
And then the same thing for that next section about the technical or legal assistance.
Request technical legal, town staff.
Town
legal
staff,
counsel.
town legal counsel, or
Or
regional
regional.
counsel.
and/or.
Yeah, I think this will come up a fair amount of times throughout this, but yeah, if we feel more comfortable with just saying and or to make sure that that's really clear that we mean multiple of these listed items, then I can go through and make that change for all the sections that applies to.
Right. Well, the next one, the or makes sense
Oh, under
in
decision.
the decision
sorry.
making.
I mean,
'Cause
that
you
makes
can't do
sense.
all three of those, or
Right.
two of them. You can only do one.
Which one are you talking about?
Five, decision-making authority.
Yeah, right. So there we would just leave it or.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Any other questions on this page? I think that mostly covers the main questions here. Moving on to subsection 6 for authority to impose conditions. Again, just added to 6A here that the planning board can impose reasonable conditions, and then added in some language showing what the conditions should ensure compliance with, and the goal, as well as trying to remain consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and the record in front of the planning board. Any questions or changes there?
So this always comes up about the town's comprehensive plan and that being a factor in decision-making. Thoughts on? So it's always the question, the comprehensive plan, as we know, is a guidance. Do we actually, can we deny a permit? If the planning board really wanted to deny a permit and use the comprehensive plan as a denial reason, I guess the question is how?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
trumps what?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And this has actually come up in a few other towns as well, and how strictly they have to adhere to the comprehensive plan and how that should play into things. And Maine law says that all municipal ordinances need to be consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. So really it's kind of the comprehensive plan, it kind of sits above the ordinance, and in a perfect reality, then the ordinance, everything to do with the ordinance, everything adopted in the ordinance is consistent with that comprehensive plan. So generally, I wouldn't say using the comprehensive plan as a reason to deny a permit. That's probably pretty difficult to make an argument for, unless, whatever factors the board is considering are, a little bit more discretionary or has some factors that relate directly to what the comprehensive plan says. I mean, I wouldn't say that it could never happen, but I think it's pretty unlikely for that to be a valid reason for them to be able to deny based on really not the ordinance criteria, but the comprehensive plan. So it's up to you really how much we want to include of the comprehensive plan in here. A lot of other towns do like to include at least some reference to the plan, just to make that piece clear. But it's also not entirely necessary. As I said, it is kind of the comprehensive plan is above it, and then if the ordinance is entirely consistent with that plan, then we don't necessarily have to reference it again.
So it's a deterrence more than, like if someone's just reading it, just skimming across and it says comprehensive plan, okay, fine. Well, if you actually get into it, you would know, or if you hired a lawyer, you would know that it probably doesn't really apply.
Yeah, so to me,
Legally speaking, I guess,
yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I think we start out the ordinance by saying that this ordinance, will be as consistent as possible to, the town's comprehensive plan. But to me, I don't like to see town's comprehensive plan in the same sentence as compliance. Because
Yep.
you can't, I mean, there is nothing to comply to because it's not an ordinance. Who's responsible for enforcing? You can't enforce,
So the ordinances should be in alignment with the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So that's what you should defer to is the ordinance.
Right. So
And right,
when
the-
they
the-
say in compliance, it should, with this ordinance, and this ordinance is then consistent with the town's comprehensive plan.
Which has a little more ambiguity and no enforcement power.
Right. So my vote would be, we don't include it for anything for issuance of compliance or permits compliance. I think it doesn't hurt to, where it can be referenced that this ordinance, is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking as I'm looking at it too. So this is about the planning board imposing conditions necessary to ensure compliance. And I'm thinking back to, I think, the planning board meeting that we had about the storage warehouse and, relying on the comprehensive plan to try and include some, I guess, more discretionary conditions around buffering and the rural character of the town, conversations like that versus basing it on compliance. So I like what you're saying. I think it shouldn't be in the same section as compliance, but maybe it, I'm not sure how you feel about including it elsewhere in terms of, conditions that may be imposed by the planning board, not necessarily for compliance with the ordinance and state law, but in terms of, it's a hard question. I think I very much see what you're saying with including the comprehensive plan kind of at all. Again, it is kind of something that's come up with multiple towns and how they want to treat the issue. So we certainly, if that's kind of everyone's consensus, we don't need to reference it directly.
Yeah, I think a lot of the lawyer who we had acquired and had talked about the comprehensive plan, saying that its nature is good, but inside it you can cherry pick from different things that prove different points, and the very simple fact that they both conflict, when you go to court, they're going to say, well, it's not admissible because you can take this, and they don't match. So I think legally speaking, it's just not admissible, right?
Yep, no, I definitely hear what you're saying. Okay. So we'll take that piece out, and I don't think it's mentioned anywhere else, but I'll keep an eye out for any areas that it is.
So are we just taking out the comprehensive plan part and leaving in the rest?
Supported by record. Now that would be previous judgments or previous.
Yeah, so what would that mean?
That would probably mean that's null and void as well, too, because you can't base one on the other. Just because somebody has it doesn't mean
the record
that's...
here, the way I was using it was just
Okay.
the record that's in front of the planning board, such as the application from the applicant for, a planning board permit, something like that, versus the historical record. But now that you guys have pointed that out, I'm wondering if that could be made a little bit more clear too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, please, definitely.
Yep.
Because I think each submission is its own entity.
Yep. Okay, but we're good on including some language, which I'll play around with that, just in terms of what the planning board is considering for that exact application, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Any other comments on section 6 before we move on? I didn't make too many changes to subsection B, 6B for conditions, pretty much left that as is. There was this subsection C that I wasn't sure if we wanted to include. It almost seemed like a comment. Violation of planning board conditions equals ordinance violation enforceable by the CEO. I wasn't sure if that was just kind of an extra that we can remove.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
can, I think that was more of probably an internal note.
Yep. All right, so 7, indirect enforcement authority. So I just tried to make that section a little bit more clear for the planning board's kind of enforcement authority that we're talking about here, since really we're not saying that they have enforcement authority, since that principally lies with the CEO. So just making that indirect authority a little bit clearer. And
And do we
then
have to
I
define
added
that?
under subsection A, the planning board shall deny any application where an unresolved ordinance violation exists on the subject property unless the application includes a plan to correct it as part of the proposed development, and that's incorporated into the approval conditions. Just making sure that that kind of covers all our bases there. The planning board shall rely on the CEO, determining compliance with the ordinance, enforce approved conditions and applicable violations. And again, kind of emphasizing the planning board does not exercise independent enforcement authority, as that remains with the CEO and the select board. And then number 8, public process responsibilities. So again, I'll double check on that 35-day timeline. And then I added in providing notice. I think I just kind of consolidated this list to make it a little bit clearer. Providing notice to the applicant, CEO, select board, town manager, and the Board of Appeals 10 days in advance. These are statutory requirements for notice there. And publishing notice of the hearing at least 7 days in advance of the hearing, just making sure that all of those responsibilities are really clearly laid out for who's responsible for providing notice and publishing notice of the hearing. Finality and appeals in subsection 9. So nothing big in subsection A, and then under subsection B is where I know we talked about this last time, that we're changing conditional use permit decisions to be appealable to the Board of Appeals rather than just going to the Superior Court. So I've tried to make that change throughout. Any questions, thoughts about that?
No.
All right. Under consultant and fee authority, so here just cleaned up the language a little bit regarding if the planning board plans to retain independent consultants, and add again when that review is reasonably necessary to evaluate compliance of an application with the ordinance, and applicants will be required to pay the costs for those services. As long as they're directly related to the review of their application and they're provided advance notice of the planning board's intention to use those services and hire an independent consultant. And the planning board can also establish and ask the applicant to establish and fund escrow accounts to make sure that all of those costs are covered. And then withholding of permits and or approvals until all required costs and fees associated are paid in full. Number 11 for permit expiration oversight. So here I know we've talked about making these definitions a little bit more clear as well for substantial start to construction, substantial commencement, however we want to name that, or substantial completion, making sure that those are really explicitly defined. And I just flipped the language here again, just to make it a little bit more clear. Planning board permits shall expire unless a substantial start is commenced within a year of approval, or construction is not substantially completed within 2 years of approval. I think that pretty much covers everything for the planning board section, unless there's any other comments.
Nope.
All
I
right.
don't think so.
So Board of Appeals, moving to the next section, didn't make many substantive changes on this section. Really just added in, again, some clarifying language, and I think a lot of that just has to do with how we, have been reformatting the chapter. And then composition and governance under subsection 2 for the Board of Appeals. Didn't change anything here. There is in the statute under 30A section 2691, it does state that the Board of Appeals should elect a chair and a secretary from among its members. Do we want to include that? Is that typically the process of the Board of Appeals?
No,
I don't think so.
no, so I would add that. Because I think it's just whenever, yeah.
When was the last time the Board of Appeals actually heard anything?
Well, we took our powers away.
Right, yeah. Right.
Okay, I will add that in. So chair and secretary annually from among its members.
Yep.
And then removal for just cause. I didn't really make any changes there. Just making sure C is clear that this subsection is not intended to limit the authority of the select board to remove a member for other lawful reasons, with state law, the town charter, or the ordinance. And then eligibility and restrictions on service under subsection 3 there. Didn't make any substantive changes here, just changed employee of the town from a staff member. Under 4, for conflict of interest standard, I just moved this around a little bit. What was C, I've moved to A, just to bring that standard up for really what the conflict of interest standard is, to make that a little bit more direct, and then followed by kind of the process to follow if there is a conflict of interest. And that's just stating that if there's any direct or indirect personal financial interest of a member, and I added in that language, or in which their impartiality could reasonably be questioned, and I caught that spelling change on there. And that just really covers kind of all the basis for a potential conflict of interest for any member. And then under B, any member can raise the issue of a conflict of interest. And that will be decided by a majority vote. And then, as we've talked about, just citing the statute again to make sure that that's clear. Under jurisdiction for matters heard by the Board of Appeals, so here I noticed I guess what I saw in there was trying to say that any appeals from notices of violations, anything like that, from the CEO should not be appealed to the Board of Appeals. And I was wondering if anyone could kind of speak more to that, or what the normal process is there.
So, I guess, again, this was changed not too long ago, I think within the last 2 or 3 years. And so it was thought that notices of violations or enforcement actions of the CEO should not be brought in front of the BOA. To be truthful, I'm not 100% sure why. I think it was more to do, well, you know, it's a notice of violation, the code enforcement officer is certified under state law, you know, to what point do you want to put that, not pressure, but on the BOA to decide
Responsibility.
responsibility to decide if the code enforcement officer issued that notice of violation in accordance to the ordinance or, so. I think that's why. The other factor has been that with all of the BOA, you know, responsibilities or jurisdiction is for the longest time, and we still are kind of on that border of even having enough members.
Right.
So that,
Okay, so maybe something that I can look into a little bit more and just see if I can come back to us with some more
yeah,
info, because the way I've seen other towns do it is that that is usually under the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals, especially when it involves, you know, the CEO interpreting the ordinance.
right.
So I can look into that and get us a more clear answer on that question.
And I do believe, and I'll look back through our old ordinances because I believe it was written to that fact that it's the interpretation that the BOA would be looking at, not so much the actual violation.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of wondering when I was reading it was, you know, those two things are kind of intertwined to a certain extent, you know, depending on what the notice of violation is and what the reasons the CEO had for issuing it. So yeah, maybe I'll bring back some research on that and see if I can get us some more kind of concrete answer on how to move forward with that piece. Because I guess as it stands, then if someone wanted to appeal a notice of violation, are we saying that would then go to the Superior Court at that point if there's no other appellate body that has jurisdiction over it? Or are we saying notices of violations are just not appealable in that sense?
I think we say now to Superior.
Right, okay.
Which I know is kind of where we're at now with the notice of violation that we have in court, is that the homeowner had no other avenue, so they had to appeal it. So,
Right,
Seems
Yeah.
like a big jump.
okay.
yeah,
I think we addressed that in another section.
yeah,
It's a big
with,
jump, right.
yes, yeah.
And how do we go about having a Board of Appeals if we don't have enough members?
Well, then I guess that was the other question is, can there be also something in there? So I went through this a lot with Jamie and with MMA because we did have a couple of items that should have gone in front of our BOA, and we were kind of just letting people know we don't have a board currently, even though the state says we're required to have a board. So where does that leave us when we don't have a board? Can then we say they have to go to Superior? You know, is it?
Right. Yep. No, it's a good question. I can touch base with Jamie again and kind of see what his thoughts are on it, and see if I think I remember looking at MMA guidelines, and they didn't really have any clear direction.
My direction from MMA was
Yeah.
you're required to have a board. You need to at least advertise that
Uh-huh.
you need board members, and then that covers you if then you have to go to court. So maybe then that's something that we add. You know, the town has, that's how MMA put it, the town has to prove that we have been seeking volunteer
Yeah,
members
due
for this
diligence.
board.
Due diligence. But is there some other avenue for mediation? Some other platform for mediation?
Oh, that's a good,
Before
That's
going
the
to,
big problem that we've had.
Yeah.
Or is there even like a, I guess you would just call it an interim Board of Appeals stating one selectman, one planning board member, one person of the public works, one, and you do it?
you can't,
Okay.
no
all right.
employees can
Okay.
sit on that board, or any, yeah.
Yeah, as we're talking about conflict of
I'm
interest,
just
yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
think of something, right?
But I
Yeah,
kind of
it's a good
like,
thought though, yeah.
I like Allison's, thought though. I mean, can then we put something in there about mediation versus going right to Superior?
Yeah, it's a huge jump.
yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Expensive.
I can see if there's any other recommended kind of avenues that we could potentially add in to kind of ease that step up from the CEO straight to the Superior Court. Yeah, I'll do some research generally on this and touch base with Jamie and see if we can come up with some ideas for next time to go over.
Okay.
Because you're going from not a lot of money to a lot of money when you start doing,
And plus it prolongs then our process. Again, with the notice of
Right.
violations we have right now going, they had the right to appeal first, so they did that appeal, and then that took a few months before we could even kick in our process for the notice of violation, so it actually prolongs our process.
Yeah.
Maybe we
Okay.
could borrow BOA from another town.
Well, that was my
as a
other,
mediation strategy.
oh, that's good.
yeah.
I don't know.
Just go to Bridgeton and say, hey,
Out of the
we don't
goodness
have
of your
enough.
heart?
We don't have enough. Are you willing to take a look at this and
Well,
try and mediate?
Well, and that is a good question, because that's actually how the general assistance works. If somebody in another town, wants to appeal a general assistance decision, then it goes that town who denied it then finds a surrounding town that would mediate that appeal, so.
Got to work with what we've got.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I can look into that for sure.
Okay.
All right. Any other thoughts on that issue, which I will just mark as something to come back to? And then another part of my review for this section was just trying to clarify the Board of Appeals when they're hearing something de novo, such as, a variance, something like that, versus an appeal. So I was trying to make those kind of standards a little bit more clear, and when they can accept new evidence as part of an appellate review, they cannot, and just citing the statute there to make sure that that was clear, because it seems like some of the requirements, it's a little confusing to read whether they could accept evidence, and even the statute, which I was looking at earlier, lists it a little bit strangely. The language in there doesn't make it super clear, so I was trying to make sure that that makes sense to people when the BOA is operating in its appellate capacity versus hearing things as an issue of kind of first impression.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then for variance requests, just listing out those standards, the undue hardship variances, practical difficulty, disability-related variances, just made that piece a little bit clearer. And then the subsections under that where I've made edits is what I was just talking about, making it clear the appellate capacity versus when they're hearing a variance request, and then citing the statutes in these sections as well. And then I included, which I know we have in a different section, you'll see I cited under variance requests for the small Roman numerals pursuant to Title 38, Section 438A. So that's just about the requirements for the municipality to notify the DEP for any variance requests in a shoreland district. So I included that here. Again, we might go back and pull things out if they're too repetitive, but it is in there for now. And then number 6, this, again, we might come back to after I have some more information based on our discussion before about the Board of Appeals jurisdiction, since this is going over and listing what things they do not have jurisdiction to hear. And I've removed a few sections here, but again, that might change based on our next discussion about that piece.
Can I go back one that you just talked about, the 38 MSR? I don't think it's a bad idea to be repetitive there, because it really lets the applicant or the person know that there's a little more meat with in this kind of thing going on, and not just, oh, well, I can just do what I want. Oops, I didn't mean to. I think it's got more bite to include it in there, even if it's repetitive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Great. So I'll just make a note that we'll keep that. Yep, I agree. I think it's a good idea to let anybody know that if they are in a shoreline district, the DEP may be weighing in on that variance request. Any other comments on this section? I think we're just about to number 7, limitations on board authority. So here, I didn't make too many changes. Just in exercising its authority, the Board of Appeals shall not grant a variance except as expressly provided by the ordinance and state law, and shall not approve a use not otherwise permitted in the applicable zoning district. So I looked this one up just to be sure that that was kind of a permissible limitation for the town to have in here. And in my comment on the side, you'll see I cited the statute, and they have an explicit line in there saying under home rule authority, a municipality can choose to adopt additional limitations for granting of a variance, such as a provision that a variance may be granted only for a use permitted in a particular zone. So if we're good with keeping that, since that's what's in the ordinance as it currently stands, then we will leave that as is.
Yes.
I'm good.
Yep.
Great. All right, number 8, voting and finality. I didn't make too many changes in this section. Just making it very clear that decisions of the Board of Appeals are considered final administrative actions of the town, and then the next step up is for judicial review under Rule 80B. And then variance standards and findings. When granting a variance, the Board of Appeals must, and then we list out the different standards here for applying the statute and ordinance criteria for whatever type of variance is requested, like we listed on the other page, undue hardship, and the other standards there. Making it clear that findings of fact and conclusions of law must be written for the Board of Appeals, showing compliance with the applicable criteria when granting a variance. and then adding in the conditions and safeguards that are imposed as necessary to ensure compliance with the ordinance, as well as to protect public health, safety, and welfare. And then under 9B, the Board of Appeals shall ensure the variance. And I was playing around with different language here. I think it had before, does not alter the character of the neighborhood. I added undermine the essential character of the neighborhood or area just to make sure that that's a little bit more clear. Will not result in undue environmental harm, and that any hardship is not self-created and meets applicable statutory standards.
Well stated.
All right, number 10, procedural authority. Again, no major changes here. I added in conducting site visits when necessary. No other real significant changes on this section. And then under 11 for decision authority, the Board of Appeals may, for appeals, affirm, modify, or reverse the decision of the CEO or planning board. So here I just kind of consolidated the list. Sometimes the bullets were getting a little crazy with how many indents we were getting. So I've just been kind of restructuring and reformatting as we go through. And then under B, decisions must be issued in writing and provided to the list that we have here: applicant, CEO, planning board, town manager, and municipal officers. And then 12 for recording and notice requirements. Here, again, just making it really clear when the applicant is responsible and when the municipality is responsible. So here, the applicant is responsible for recording the decision and the findings of fact in the registry of deeds within 90 days, or else the variance becomes void. And then again, listing that same DEP requirement with notifying the state for any variances within shoreland districts. Making sure that those notice requirements are listed everywhere.
May I ask a side question on this? Does the town have some kind of checklist for applicants with any kind of follow-up information like this?
So kind of what we were talking about with the appendices, but not explicitly saying this is what the applicant should do if approved, or this is what the applicant needs to do, for a completed application, for, what needs to be met to be approved. Is that what you're?
No, I'm saying it after fact, like this one here with the applicant is responsible for filing with Oxford County Registry of Deeds within 90 days, or else, then it's void. So if there was some,
Yeah.
once they've been to the Board of Appeals, then what happens afterwards? Do they have to refer back to this ordinance, or would it make sense to have some kind of checklist? If this, then that, then. Just to help people, follow the rules, basically.
I'm just a little apprehensive unless we're going to do it for every single thing.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, and I say, and maybe this is where maybe we say included in the findings of facts. I can say, so typically in the findings of facts, it will say applicant is to record. But again, that goes from board to board, and if it's not specifically said in the ordinance that it should be included in the findings of facts, then it might not be.
Right.
So, I guess we can kind of come back.
Maybe just a side
To-
note, yeah, just to make things as user-friendly as possible.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'll start as well. And I think, again, once once we get through the first round of edits, I think it will be kind of easier to see what we might need to add or remove or, make a little bit cleaner. So maybe that'll kind of help us as we move along. Moving on to 13, I'm not going to go over this piece again. This is pretty much, I just copied exactly what I changed in the previous section for the planning board consultant and fee authority. If the Board of Appeals wants to retain independent consultants at the cost of the applicant, as long as they have notice, pretty much the same language there. And then next page, finality and appeals. So again, pretty similar to what we wrote under the planning board. Again, just outlining kind of the next step for appeal to the Superior Court under Rule 80B, and when variances will expire. Again, going back to the substantial start to construction within 1 year, or if it's not substantially completed within 2 years. And then C, there was a line in here about reconsideration, which there's a lot of requirements under the statute that we could include here about the Board of Appeals' ability to reconsider its own decisions. I added in at least just the 45-day time frame, and then the reference to the statute. And you'll see it in that comment on the side, the statute language. So we can include more of that, the other things that we might think about including is that requests for reconsideration can be filed within 10 days. The Board of Appeals can also decide on its own to reconsider a decision. And then there's several other time frames, which it doesn't happen incredibly often. We did just have it happen in another town, so that's kind of why it's forefront of mind that it is a tricky process and gets very procedural when it does happen. But again, we're at least citing the statute here. So if we want to just kind of leave that as is, or I was thinking it might be helpful to at least add the 10-day reconsideration deadline, so that if anyone, wanted to apply to the Board of Appeals or submit a request for reconsideration, they would at least know that time frame or their right to be able to do that. Otherwise, I don't think it's fully necessary to restate the entire statute there.
I think it's prudent to actually state what the statute says, and I think that's what we do in the current ordinance. I'm just trying to find it.
All right, I've put a note on there to include all the requirements of that statute for reconsideration, if that's what you're thinking is in the current ordinance, to make sure that's still all in there. All right. 1.3, moving on, which activities do not require permits or approvals under the ordinance. So here, no major changes, just making clear that we're referring to municipal land use permits, not just any permit, any type of approval required by the state, plumbing, anything like that. Only applying to land use permits or planning board approval shall be required for the following activities. And then no major changes for A, B, and for C. I know we had talked about just changing the requirement for exterior alterations or additions to an existing structure that don't exceed now 100 feet instead of the 80 feet that we had before. Mm-hmm. So I've made that change in, I think, all the areas where that's mentioned. And then just added that language, and does not require a new or expanded foundation, as that we had talked about that a little bit last time.
Yep.
And then moving forward, so D, no major changes for non-structural residential land activities. E, no changes there. F, just making sure that the fences section reads a little bit clearer. G, small accessory structures, same thing, changing that to 100 square feet rather than 80, and not requiring a permanent foundation or utility connection. So that language I added in. If you have any thoughts on that or don't think it should be included. All right. H, farm or fire ponds, no real changes here. I, same thing, no changes.
So I'm
And
sorry,
J-
can we go back to the G? So are you saying that even if somebody builds a 100 square foot shed and they put utilities to it, then it's going to require a permit?
So that's my question. Yeah, that's what I'm saying right now, is that anything requiring a connection would need a permit. I was looking at how several other towns had included that, but totally up to you guys whether you'd like to include that, or we can just keep and not requiring a permanent foundation, or we can get rid of both. Just some thoughts I had while reading that.
So I would ought to not add either of those. And I understand why other towns do, because they inspect foundations and they inspect utilities and we do not.
Needs an address.
What?
Needs an address.
What needs an address?
C&D utility.
Oh,
Just throwing it up there.
if they hook a shed up to a utility, they need a 911 address?
If it's a shed by itself, the CMP account needs an address.
Oh, the CMP account. Gotcha. CMP won't hook up. Okay, gotcha.
Well, they will.
Yeah.
But if you have in a house and you're gonna hook up a shed,
Yeah.
the house has the address.
Yeah.
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 If it's
Yeah.
a shed, shed.
So that's just my 2 cents. I would ought to not put them on because we don't inspect either of those. And I think that's the purpose of other towns.
Yep, definitely.
Makes sense.
All right, so if anybody has any other thoughts, then I'll take those out. Great. Farmer fire ponds, like I said, HI, don't think any changes there. And then general compliance requirement, again, just making sure that this is really clear. Nothing in this section exempts an activity from compliance with the ordinance. And all exempt activities are still subject to all the requirements of the ordinance and state and federal law and other regulations. Moving on to 1.4, which activities require permits or approvals under this ordinance? So didn't make any major changes here. Under A, for construction, alteration, or demolition of structures, again, under number 2, just change that from 80 feet to 100 square feet for enlargements, additions to an existing structure. No major changes for B, establishment or change of use. C, uses requiring review under the land use control table. No real changes there. And D, shoreland district activities requiring approval. Just added in expansions, relocation, or replacement of non-conforming structures. And then for number 4, vegetation clearing or disturbance requiring approval under applicable shoreland standards. And then here we have the comment about requiring the photo documentation for shoreland district activities. So I added it in a later section. Again, I was kind of playing around with how often to state the same requirements. So I did add it under 1.5D. But we can also include it here if we think that it's helpful. I think there's one other place that I also include it. So I do think it's in here twice.
I mean, I don't think it needs to be in this section. I think that was more of an internal note to us that we really, that we require it. But.
Yep, perfect, okay. And I saw in the comment you added too, you had said photographs prior to commencement of work, at the time of the permit, and upon completion of work. I think in the ordinance as it is, from what I saw, I think it's prior to commencement and then upon completion. Was there an interest in adding another photo requirement for at the time the permit is issued, or I wasn't sure if there was any thoughts on that?
I mean, the CEO would be inspecting, I would think, or has the option to inspect.
Well, my thought is more maybe conditional use permits, because you could submit your photos with your application and it could be another 45 days to, I mean, they have 35 days to do a public hearing, then another 30 days for written findings of facts, or 45. So there could be a time lapse there, and a lot could happen. So that would, I guess that was my only thought. And maybe, so then maybe saying, you know, that time permit is issued if it's been over the 30, you know, maybe putting a.
It's not that hard for people to submit photos these days, though.
Yeah.
You know, take some photos and email them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
No. And in many cases, like soils reports and stuff like that are already
Right.
there anyways. You're submitting photos and things. So, I mean, I don't think it's very hard.
I think, that, I don't know, I'm pretty adamant about shoreland zoning stuff, so just the more property owners know they're going to be watched on what they do and how they do it, I think is better, in my opinion.
Okay, so we're thinking include if there's a time lapse of more than 30 days between when the application is submitted and the time the permit is issued, then they should be required to submit photographs documenting the same conditions. And then again, at the end of the construction, right? That covers everything.
So wouldn't that be every person that comes before the planning board? Because you issue it, you have photos, then it's 30 days, review, site visit, boom. So, I mean, you're already over.
Right, so you don't need to put the time, you don't need to put that time in there, because it's just one more thing for someone paying attention to it, like the CEO.
So I guess
to have
just-
to be paying attention to the time as well. I
Yeah.
think it's more activity-based as opposed to time-based.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
so I think we just say that we want it before, to prior to when it's issued, and then when it's complete.
Yes.
There's
Yep.
no questions.
Right,
Right.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Black and white.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that makes it clearer for anyone reading it. Less deadlines to calculate. I think that makes sense.
In the
All right.
past, when we've had pictures, there's no question.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and do they need to be timestamp pictures? pictures?
Well,
That
that's
they're
a
not
good,
submitting the same
well,
ones?
That's a good, I mean,
Well,
well.
I mean, seasonally it might change, but in 30 days or 40 days, it's not going to change that
And
much.
most-
I would
I
say
mean, anybody
timestamp.
can change
Most
the
of
date
them
on
are
anything nowadays.
time-stamped
so, I mean,
anyways,
I suppose we
right?
could say it.
If
but
you have it on there. If it's not
Yeah.
on, then it's not.
right.
I suppose you could, but I mean, you can alter anything nowadays. to read
Because you can
whatever it
get
is
Google
want.
Earth from a year ago, you know?
Right.
It's like, these trees look fine. Well, why do they cut 4 feet off? Did it in the snow.
So,
AI
I mean, thoughts on timestamp, and I'm only, again, I'm throwing this because of the recent experiences that the town has had with like the dangerous building. Some of those photos were not time-stamped when we went to court, but to what you were saying, I actually wrote the date on them because I knew like the date that they were.
Right.
So unless you actually have, you know, your camera set up to
Yeah.
to
But-
date stamp.
But you can. I mean, it's just accountability of the applicant. I don't think that's too much to ask. It's a whole lot easier for them to hold them accountable and making sure that they're complying with what's been permitted than to go back afterwards and make them remediate any kind of issues that they violated.
So then we would have to, then I would, if we want to go that route, then I would just say we have to define time-stamped, so someone's not just, or are we going to accept somebody just writing on them?
Okay, then you can say digitally time-stamped. I mean, it's-
That's true. Yeah.
Right.
So we can add it and see what feedback we get.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
have to hold public hearings on this,
Right,
so
Sure.
true.
I'd say add it and then see.
I'm sure there's some way to doctor a timestamp, but
Well, there's.
let's not worry about that till.
There are
after.
so
Worry
many
about
ways
it.
for people
Right.
to break the rules.
Right.
But,
I mean,
you know,
even
if we have a rule,
Start somewhere.
it's a better chance it's going to be followed.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay, so we want to say digital timestamp then, or just timestamp?
Digital.
I like digital.
Digital.
Okay.
Can you do that on your camera phones? Can you add a timestamp? onto
I don't
a
know how
photo?
to turn it off.
I mean, is that
On the
just
photo.
for ease of use for people who are doing this? You know what I'm saying? Like, if they don't have the required stuff, well, I can't do that.
If you're asking me to do it right now, I couldn't.
I don't know either. I'm just asking.
Drew's over there doing it.
Mine's been on forever. I don't know how to turn it
It
off.
says on the photo, but it says on the date.
Because certain photos embedded inside the actual file itself have
Right.
their own individual timestamps within the file itself, not
Right.
specifically on the photo itself.
That's how
Is
I
that
keep
the
track of
timestamp, or is
how
it
old
the
my
digital
grandkids
file
are.
saying, hey, this was making this? I don't
I
know.
guess as long as it shows up somehow.
Somehow.
Right.
Right.
Whether
Okay.
it's embedded in the file when you open it,
Mm-hmm.
then that should be legitimate enough.
Anyways.
Right,
Right. I mean,
You have
Right.
to-
yeah.
yeah. It's not
Hash
like it
that
needs to
out.
be printed on it, like in the old days when you had your camera and you actually,
I kind of like that better.
you know.
If we have to update it with technology and language.
Yeah, I would think that would
we
open
can.
up a can of worms,
Yeah.
trying to get everybody to put the time on the photo. I think with anyone using a phone, you know,
Yeah.
it's gonna have the embedded data in there for the timestamp. So
Sure.
I think that maybe we can leave it at that for now and
Sure.
maybe revisit it if it needs. All right, digital timestamp. All right, any other thoughts on that? That we technically haven't gotten to the photographic section yet, but E, I didn't really make any changes to if we're going back to 1.4E for subdivision activity requiring approval. F, I just made a comment to make sure that this, once we're done with the non-conforming chapter, complies with that. G, didn't make any major changes. H, no major changes. And then under section 1.5, what types of permits or approvals are required? I just added in a site to 1.4H above for permits and approvals being issued only when the reviewing authority determines that the application materials comply with all standards of the ordinance. And then building or use permit under the code enforcement officer, just added in the 100 feet instead of 80 once again. I didn't make any major changes other than that in that section. Planning board permit under subsection B, no major changes there. And same with conditional use permit. I did have a question on, there was language in there that said continual commercial basis. I'm trying to figure out based on these track changes. Conditional use permits shall be reviewed and approved by the planning board prior to issuance of any building permit. Then I think some of the factors under the conditional use permit, it had the language continued commercial basis, and I wasn't sure what that was referring to, if anyone had any input on that.
I don't think that's, I think that probably just got thrown in because we don't really have commercial basis. So I think that's something that just when it was being developed.
Yeah, okay,
the
great.
language,
Just wanted
so.
to make sure. And then D, shoreland district permitter approval. So this is where I've added in that photo documentation requirement. And this is really just copied over from what the ordinance currently has, and we'll add in that photos should be taken prior to the application, and then when the permit is issued, and then when completed with digital timestamps for all photographs. And then moving to subsection E for subdivision approval. No major changes there. Same for variance approval and permits required in addition to other approvals. No major changes. And the next few sections, not sure what kind of the best way to move through all of this is, since we still have probably half the chapter, I would say. I can flip through and, for the sake of time, try and see what other major comments, questions I had. I don't think I made a lot of substantive changes on the next few sections. But if there's anything anyone wants to discuss that we're kind of flipping through, let me know. So my first comment under 1.6, we're going past C through G, and then H under that section, certification and signatures. I think in the current ordinance, we have that applications will be signed by the property owner or authorized agent, and also by the person or firm doing the construction work. Did we want to leave that out, that requirement for signature from any contractors? Are we good with that as is?
So in practice, I will say that it's been one of any of those three. It's not, property owner and agent or, so I think we add back in that it can be the, you know, construction contractor and or,
Okay, so property owner or authorized agent or the contractor performing the work, so not separate requirements for
right?
each of multiple of those individuals. Got it. All right. CEO administrative flexibility for submission requirements. Wasn't sure if you had thoughts on flexibility. I was thinking about changing that to, you know, discretionary or something other than that, unless we like administrative flexibility for submission requirements.
I think,
As long as it's clear.
yeah, any wording that you would,
I like discretion better.
discretion.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think, yes.
Yeah, because then it's not, oh, this feels good. Okay.
Yeah. All right, I will change that. CEO administrative discretion for submission requirements. And then I think that's everything for 1.6. Section 1.7, what are the procedures for administering permits and approvals under this ordinance? I just added in that the reviewing authority will date and timestamp all applications upon receipt, which we did include earlier under the CEO's responsibilities. Just making that applicable to all of the entities to timestamp the applications. I think that's already probably a common practice. And then completeness review. Again, just noting that that's repeated from previous sections. I don't think any other major changes here. I made the same change under C for denial by default. I just took that piece out and just saying that if there's a failure to act within the required time period on an application, that just means there's not automatic approval. Does not mean that there's an automatic denial. Moving on to burden of proof under D. E, permit display and site availability, no changes. F, conditions of approval, no changes. And then under G, for time limits on permits and approvals, I just added in that there should be a written request for extension. And I tried to clarify these time frames to just make sure that this was what was intended, saying that the written request for an extension must be made at least 30 days before the expiration of the permit or approval, and then the extension can be granted anywhere between 30 days prior to 30 days after the date of expiration. And if it's been over 30 days past the expiration, then they do not qualify any longer for a time extension.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're moving on to section 1.8, how must an applicant give notice to abutting property owners? So under B, property owners entitled to notice. So here, this is what we had talked about last time, changing that 500 feet to 250 feet for notice provided to property owners within 250 feet of the subject property boundary. And then clarifying that the property owners are those listed in the tax records. And then let me know if this is clear to everyone and understandable, the requirement that we had been discussing the last time, where the application involves the creation of a new lot, subdivision, or reconfiguration of lot boundaries. The 250-foot notice radius shall be measured from the exterior boundaries of the proposed lot, as shown on the submitted plan, rather than from the boundaries of the existing parcel, to make sure that just that piece of the land was where the 250-foot notice was being calculated from.
Yeah,
That's
that
it.
makes,
That sounds fine. Yes.
Great.
Yep.
All right. I didn't make any major changes to contents of notice. Just added in under each notice shall include location and a brief description of the subject property. I know we changed these slightly from what the ordinance currently has, but I think that still covers everything. And then proof of notice under D. No major changes there. Failure of receipt, just adding in that language about if any property owner does not receive notice, this will not invalidate any future proceedings as long as the applicant has tried in good faith to comply with the notice requirements. Section 1.9, what time limits apply to work authorized by a permit or approval. Here, I think Betty had those comments in there just about updating the definitions like we had talked about for substantial start and completion. For C, did anybody have anything?
no.
Nope.
Okay. All right, conditions and phasing. Here, just making that clear that the planning board can establish alternative timeframes for phase development as necessary based on the nature, scale, or impact of the project, provided all those conditions are consistent with the ordinance. And then under D for extensions of time, pretty much the same thing that we just talked about, a written request for an extension 30 days before. That pretty much is all the same language. And I did add under number 5, which I will make a note to add on the previous section when we talk about extensions. Permits expired beyond the extension period shall require submission of a new application under the ordinance provisions in effect at that time. Just reiterating that if a permit has become void or expired, that requires reapplication.
That all looks good.
Great. And then section 1.10, what activities require a zoning compliance certificate? And this is where we started to make that change for the name of the certificate there. And I just added some language clarifying purpose and authority for the certificate. And it will only be issued by the CEO upon determining the structure has been completed or the use has been established in compliance with the ordinance and all applicable conditions of approval. Don't think I made any major changes to B when a zoning compliance certificate is required. Under C, D, and E, I don't think I made any major changes. And then, which stop me if there's anything anybody wants to go over. But moving forward to 1.11, the procedure for planning board review. Again, I don't think I made any major changes here. Under 1.11, once you get to subsection G for site visits, the planning board may conduct a site visit as part of its review. And there was a line in here about if access is not allowed or the property owner refuses to allow access for a site visit. The planning board shall cancel the site visit. And I added some language just to make that a little bit clearer, that the planning board can proceed with review based on the available information, unless there's other thoughts on the site visit piece, or the intention was different there if a property owner does not allow a site visit to occur.
I think we will always want access to it, no
Yeah,
matter
but-
what. We have to at least view it
But if
personally.
they deny you,
But if they deny it, well
Then-
then,
That can be part of your process, right? Just
you
say
can
that.
go ahead and say, well, prove us wrong.
Right.
right.
You know, let us in and prove us right. It's like, do you have a fireplace or do you have a wood stove? Well, show me. You know,
Right.
Don't assume you have a fireplace.
And, well, I'm just thinking, people could unintentionally sketch what's there incorrectly, and when you go to the site, you could find things that don't match that, obviously, to the site visits. And obviously, that's the time when we go to verify the information that they submit, so we kind of have to be allowed. Now, is that reason for denial of,
Well, it actually doesn't say it's reason for it. We just say that then the site visit is canceled, and I
Yeah.
think what that meant is because we have to advertise the site visit.
uh-huh,
If then, after it's advertised, the
Yeah.
property owner says, hey, we don't want you on our property, then we have to, I think it probably meant then we have to publish that it's been canceled. So the public doesn't show up.
And just
Oh.
keep going through that over and over. I mean, we just went through this, right? Up on Mountain Road? Where we
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
go on the property.
Yeah,
So you gotta have some type of enforcement to.
Which we can include that as, part of the reasons why the planning board could deny a permit, if a site visit, if they're not allowed onto the property to conduct one. I think the way it's written now, I was trying to leave it kind of open because I wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but that makes sense with the notice to the public of the cancellation. Which right now, reading it, if access to the property is not provided, the planning board may proceed with review based on available information. So it is kind of leaving it up to the planning board. Obviously, we can make this clearer, but that if a site visit isn't permitted, then if they don't have all the available information to make a decision to approve a permit. I mean, I'm trying to think if there are scenarios where a site visit might not be needed, or
well, I mean, the planning board has waived site
yeah,
visits.
oh, yeah.
So,
I like
Do
the
they waive
way,
it because they want to, or because the owner, the applicant says, oh, I don't want you on the property?
they usually waive it because it's not necessary.
It's not pertinent
It's not.
to the outcome
Uh-huh.
of what they're applying for, more or less.
I like that it says you may proceed, meaning they just can't keep putting that up as a stumbling block, I mean, you can keep going on with the process even if they don't let you in. And
Right, but you can say, like, I don't feel comfortable approving this without a site walk.
Right.
If you feel like there's a situation that you don't. Right,
As it's worded now, that's not,
right.
it's not an option.
No, but that's what she was saying. She
Yeah.
could add that.
Okay.
And I think it's,
Yeah.
I think it's prudent to add that. And I do think we need to add back to, just make it clear that the public should be notified of that the site visit's been canceled.
I mean, and it's not always for detrimental reasons. You can also find things that could benefit them during the site walk process in terms of square footage, things that they could use to their advantage or something else. It's not just to hinder someone, I would say.
Should there be
You
a
would hope.
timeline on how soon people if the applicant cancels and says, oh, I can't do it today, I mean, how do you notify
Right, that's what I
people
was
that quickly?
thinking.
There's gotta be
Well,
some kind of timeline there.
I don't think it's so much that it's just canceled because somebody's sick or can't, you know, we have so many out of state.
Uh-huh.
I think it's a point blank refusal, like after. And I don't think we have to make the best effort, whether it be just posting something at the store, you know, that it's been canceled.
Right.
Turns out there's a lightning storm. Have to
I
reschedule.
I think some of the purpose of this was, you know, again, that, and it, if it's a high profile application that, you know, 10 people from the public that's not the board shows up on this property,
Right.
then at least we can say, we should at least try to notify the public in some shape or form, no matter even if it's a day before. At least we have social media now we use,
Sure. Yeah.
so.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll work on adding in the notice requirements for site visits and cancellations. And then restructure that language a bit for the planning board to consider a point blank refusal, like you said, for the site visit. All right, any other comments on that section?
No, I don't think so.
Nope.
All right, moving to H, conduct of hearings. I didn't make too many changes there. I, planning board decision and conditions. J, review standards applicable to planning board permits. And Betty had that comment in there about when review standards are finalized, we can insert that citation or reference to the chapter there. And then findings of fact and conclusions of law, subsection K, I didn't make any changes. We'll cite the chapter for the review standards there. Independent consulting and peer review fees, I did not make any changes there. We've talked about that in the previous sections. M, relationship to building permits and certificates. I didn't make any major changes here. Or to N, finality of conditional use decisions, that we made that change for conditional use permits are now appealable to the Board of Appeals. Next section, 1.12, what is the process for appealing a decision of the CEO or planning board? I didn't make any major changes here.
Do we want to more or less just jump to where you do have comments?
Yeah.
Because I think looking through this, like the rest of it is not substantial changes.
Yep.
So that last page.
So I think on D,
D.
matters not subject to appeal, I think we've kind of already spoken about that though, right? We need to,
Yep. Yep, that'll just mark as a section to revisit. Skipping forward. Under 1.13, what is the process for seeking a variance under subsection C? Again, this is the other spot where the shoreland zone notice to the DEP of a variance request is listed again, and the statute is cited. I don't think there are too many other changes. And I'd like to give this a little bit more review next time, just to make sure there aren't any additional comments. But if I do see anything that I haven't marked when I'm going through and making the changes from today, then we can discuss that next time.
Okay. So our last page that has just the comment, that says page 5, when it got printed, is just an expansion of, if you look back on, 1, 2, 3, 4. So
Yep, I think it'll just say what page it's under and then
Yeah.
whatever comment I have on the side there, which most of that is just potential language for that revocation and legal escalation part that we were talking about. And some other kind of potential language to use in those sections, but I don't think we missed anything substantial there.
Oh, okay, right there.
yeah, so
Okay.
All right, I think that pretty much sums up
so
chapter
Meredith,
2. So what I'll do, kind of what we've been doing, at least the process that we've been using so far, I'll go through and basically accept track changes for any of the language that we had no issue with. Any of the sections that I've marked as revisiting, I'll keep those in track changes the next time you get the chapter, so it'll be a much cleaner copy to review, except for those sections that we want to spend a little bit more time on.
okay.
So do you wanna just call it right there and do C
Yeah,
and
because
D?
we're gonna have to,
We'll have to come back and review it and almost do the same thing.
Yeah.
Again.
yeah.
We'll do that. So I guess we'll just postpone talking about new laws and the current zoning ordinances and the zoning maps.
Although, before we let Meredith go, I
Yeah.
think just to briefly say, we had a discussion because there's so many new laws that need to be incorporated that we think once we get this chapter, like, kind of finalized where we'd like it, that perhaps the next avenue is to take our current zoning ordinance and incorporate those new laws. One reason being is we did receive a grant from MOCA, to incorporate those, but they have to be adopted by, June of next year, or at June meeting for next year. So it
Yeah.
only seemed prudent that, we just take the current ordinance, amend it to what we have to for those new laws, take that to vote next June. So I think that might take a couple of months, maybe. I don't know if that's something that you can kind of maybe work on and make some suggestions in the current zoning where those laws fit in. I think you've kind of already done that. So.
Sure,
That was
yeah,
gonna be
definitely.
our
I can
next
take a look at
discussion.
those and
So maybe at the
see where they
next-
might fit in and
Yeah,
draft some potential language for those.
yeah, so maybe at the next meeting then we'll just do the review, the second review of what you come back with on chapter 2. And then we can talk further about the approach we want to take for this,
Right.
Perfect,
so.
okay. Great, and did you want me to look at any of those other chapters, I think, that you guys had gotten through the last time?
No,
For right now?
no, I think at
Okay.
this time we're gonna pause because we also, probably in June or July, we'll want to take something. The select board's been asking for like a an update. So we'd like to submit what we have so far to them. So,
Got it. That sounds good. All right.
so next meeting
Next
is
meeting.
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
Whew, right before town meeting.
Oh, boy.
Oh,
Doesn't get
joy.
any better.
It doesn't get any better than that.
All right, June 3rd, 5 p.m.
So that will be chapter 2 again.
And we could go over the non-conforming chapter. There was just
Oh, yes.
one last change I think I hadn't gone over with everyone about the mergers
Yep.
for lots, which we could just finish that up. I think that'll take 5 minutes for
Okay.
next time.
Okay, yep.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, public comment? No one's here? Drew?
had one.
No? We did. We did, one comment from Drew. Motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. Second.
Discussion? No?
Nope. All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye.